welcome to Bleach Revisited. I am Kara Gold, your host of this series in which we will be reading every single chapter of the Bleach manga, providing critical analysis of the art and narrative, as well as personal response to each of these chapters. We'll also be discussing how the individual chapter connects to the rest of the manga as a whole. As usual, we begin these videos with a reading of the chapter that we are currently discussing for the episode. This is Chapter 122, Don't Lose Your Grip. Let go of me, please! Ah, stop that! Hey, I'm trying to help you. I could just leave you here, you know. Fine, leave me here. I've got to help Uryu. I can't let you do that. I, Makizo Aramaki, a.k.a. Maki Maki, 10-year veteran of the 11th Company, am a man of chivalry. I don't abandon women and children just because they ask me to. Yeah! You little. Yeah. Oh. Sorry. I don't want to get mixed up with the Koretsuchi or be shot by the guy with the glasses. Sorry I had to get rough. Maybe I was a little too rough. I'll apologize when she wakes up. She's weird, but she doesn't seem like a bad sort, even if she is a Ryoka. Now, boy, it's actually very time-consuming to set this thing up. He did that to his own arm. Ha! Painful. Very painful. It hurts terribly. My head feels like it's going to melt. Bleach. Chapter 122. Don't lose your grip. It seems the girl got away. Oh well, if there's a strand of her hair lying around, that's all I'll need to find her. Oh, and when I do, I want to study her until there's only mincemeat left. Every minute, every second is precious. That monster. But I may have a chance against him. His spiritual pressure is strong, but unstable. I should be able to buy enough time for Orihime to get far away, and then escape myself. There are two of them. I can't shoot them both at the same time. If this Koretsuchi is a captain, then the girl behind him is his assistant? But she's just standing there. While an arrow is aimed at her master, maybe she can't fight. Then I'll go for him first. Not bad. You move well. What you did earlier, now this. That was Hirinkyaku, flying bamboo blindside, wasn't it? Moving at high speed by creating a current of spiritual energy beneath your feet. That's an advanced Quincy move, is it not? I'm surprised a fellow your age has mastered it. You're good. You must be very talented. I didn't see him. When did he? But I can't let you keep on like that. We too have a move called Shunpo, but it's quite tiring. I'll have to study the girl later, because I'm a busy man, unlike you. I've decided to kill you with the least effort. Tear him up. Ashisogi Jizo. Leg cutting Jizo. A Jizo is a protector of the people and the souls of deceased children. Is he releasing his Zanpakuto? Uh-oh. It's different from Sunzaki Karasu, splitting crow. I can't figure out what it does from its shape. What is it? What does it do? If it's the kind that can absorb my attack, I'll have to strike carefully. Darn it! There isn't time to think. What? Oh no, I forgot about her. Let go, Wait a second. He's not. I don't believe it. He hacked right through her. But isn't she on his side? Why? Fool! I taught you never to let go, even if your arms were torn off. I'm sorry, sir. Huh, forget it. I wasn't expecting much from you anyway. Besides, at this point, it'll be as easy as strangling a baby. August 10th, sunny. I had nothing to do, so I walked over to the vacant lawn and found Karen there with some kids and a super flamboyant man I'd never seen before who was screaming about something called the Caricature of Superheroes. I really didn't know what to do. Then I took a closer look at the man and I realized it was Don Kanonji? But what was Karen doing playing with someone so famous? At first I thought I'd get his autograph, but I didn't know if I should just walk up casually and ask them what they were doing or what. So I pretended not to see anything and went home. That night, before I went to bed, I realized I'd barely played outside since summer vacation started. To be continued. That is it for chapter 122. Oh boy, this has a title that I can't remember. Like carrying someone? Something about carrying somebody? I think it's got something to do with carrying somebody. Yeah, don't lose your grip. I made a don't lose your way joke reference, you know. That's the previous chapter. Okay. Let us talk about this one, huh? Let's get into the art. Let's get into the narrative. Let's get into a little bit of how I feel about it. Yeah, I did remember this guy's name. It's Maki Maki. How did I forget? Makizo Aramaki. Everyone's favorite sleazeball looking guy. I do like that this guy looks like absolutely like a sleazeball kind of character. He looks like the kind of guy that whenever Ichigo ran past those 11th squad guys that were all smoking and playing cards, he looks like he'd fit right in with them. Which I do love. I love that, like, the 11th are essentially just a bunch of criminals. Though, as we're coming to find with Mayuri Karatsuchi, it seems as though even the leadership is probably just a bunch of criminals. In fact, this whole Gotai thing, this whole 13 court cards, I'm starting to think that, like, this notion of like actual superiority is not really what it's cracked up to be. And that these folks are just criminals. But perhaps that's something that we're coming to kind of find out is that really truly the upper echelons of this, any sort of actual claim to power they have, are like right to kind of have this strength and lord over others as a god of death is perhaps arbitrary, and that some of the worst people are among them. Certainly seems to be the case, and it's striking because our first introduction to a lot of the captains, we have Byakuya, right? Byakuya, name that I'll get right one day. uh we have him, and he seems very regal, he seems very formal, he seems like he takes this position quite seriously, and while the dubious ethics of kidnapping your sister so that she can be held without trial to be executed are pretty intense, you can at least be like, okay, well, this is a place that really cares about its laws, even if they really aren't made to benefit anyone other than the Soul Reapers. But man, there's even some real criminal folks just amongst even their highest ranks, huh? Really makes you think. Maybe. Honestly, yeah, I think whenever I talk about, the individual versus society, I really feel like this is Kubo giving a huge critique towards these sort of hierarchical structures that exist, that like the generals, certainly in military structures, right, that these generals and even leaders are just as unethical and terrible as anyone else. And certainly that has been true throughout Japanese history. There's been quite a few camps and things that you can look into, and whenever I say camp, I don't mean like the fun ones that you go to over summer. Um, Human experiment kind of stuff going on, that sort of thing. And we talked about that before, but Mayuri certainly represents the worst of, eugenicists and human experimenting, and all of that gets written off, usually underneath military, uh, governance or whatever, military sort of time. I say military times, war times, um, war crimes, all of that. But even now, like, Mary isn't really at war with anybody, and he's really still terrible. Um, but yeah, I really see that there's like this condemnation of, uh, not just the military. I wouldn't keep it as close minded as the military. So certainly the Gote is, a military unit, but any sort of, structure that has this social sort of hierarchy where the expectation is that the people on top are somehow better or worthwhile, but they're afforded more power, and more sort of convenience of life. You see a lot of that, kind of really criticized throughout Bleach, and it's something that I appreciate. Like a lot of shonen manga will explore like corruption, especially to set up a villain. Corruption is something that you see as a typical theme, but really seeing like Bleach kind of pits that corruption as something that is, related to the individual and their connection to others, and then individuals that put, these ideals before actual lived connections, are the ones that allow these sorts of systems to, be in place. These systems that allow dangerous men like Mayuri to hold power. So it's interesting. It's a neat kind of take in general, and it's one that I feel is thematically kind of cogent throughout all of Bleach. Even as we start to get individual Shinigami like Maki Maki here, who certainly seems to side with our protagonist, he does that at more or less gunpoint, right? And yeah, like he's still a member of the 11th. He's still kind of, a man of questionable character, and he still knocks out Orihime here. She does chomp him pretty strongly. Again, this first page, this whole moment, not only to establish, Orihime's egress from the situation, but also I like that it gives us a little bit more perspective on different Shinigami, different members of the 11th as well. But, it's a comedic moment to break up the atmosphere of the serious fight that we're doing with Mayuri, right? We do have the classic person walks in on the very bottom of a corner of a panel who we don't get to see, that may do something unkind towards our characters. You know, the last time that this happened explicitly, uh, Eisen got killed. So, maybe this is the same person that killed Eisen. Who knows? We'll find out, maybe. Interestingly enough, so Mayuri did this whole like extendy arm thing, and you'd expect that he could slurp his arm right back up, right? But like no, I like that Uryu hops away, perhaps even sensing that movement of Reishi, that this is going to cause like be some sort of thing that he expects this to be an attack on him. But no, Mayuri just blows his own arm off. Um, and yeah, I love that he just injects himself with whatever this is and grows a new arm right there on the spot. So yeah, at least he's willing to do this stuff to himself. Of course, this man's grotesquerie is put on point, made very clear, and especially against, a character like Uryu, it's it's interesting the way that these two characters kind of clash, and that Mayuri is one that has all of these tools and techniques to assist him, just as Uryu does. It's just that Mayuri's truly are grotesque. That you have to wonder, how did Uryu ultimately get to learn all of these things? How were all of these techniques developed by the Quincy in the past? Certainly, the idea of, well, we have to defeat the Hollows, like, I don't know. You saw how it makes his hands bleed, how it makes his fingers, his nails kind of chip. You have to worry about all of the failures that the Quincy also went through. So it's interesting. Uryu, while he certainly has a prettier, perhaps more acceptable use of power, he isn't all that different, from Mayuri. I say this, but like obviously Uryu and Mayuri are quite different. My point here is that we have two characters that make use of a lot of tools and make use of similar sets of powers, but you can see how they get used to different ends and how one is perhaps more acceptable, more sort of seen as something to be proud of, where the other one, Mayuri isn't worried with pride or honor or anything like that. He's just worried about results. So perhaps Mayuri even represents sort of a version of Uryu. Would Uryu have no ethics? Would Uryu truly be a villainous sort of character even? And it's interesting that we get to see, like, oh well, who would win out of this sort of clash? Perhaps who would win out of these two different kind of ethos, put one against the other. And I like that we see the failures of both here, and we'll get into that. I do wish there was a little bit more here. I mean, we do get some sparse art, but nevertheless, we're reminded immediately that this is all like in a hallway, which it seemed like a much more open space. I think that is one fair criticism of Kubotai. A lot of people bring up, Bleach no backgrounds, and we've talked about that before. But I do think that the actual physical space doesn't really come up as much. So whenever it does, it can be striking, like in this moment in this panel. It can be easy to kind of forget where you are whenever it's a little bit more nebulous. There are moments where it works and the space is used in different ways that like tracks, right? We certainly saw a little bit of that in both of Ichigo's, well, all three of Ichigo's fights, really. From him cleaving the kind of wall against Ikaku to, the entire fight with Renji and Zabimaru kind of cutting into the one building, and yet again, Ichigo being knocked into the wall that he is. And then later on with, the entire kind of maze of structures that Ichigo manages to sort of lose Zaraki in, and then Zaraki jumps, like crashes through a whole wall coming to fight him, and they cut down entire buildings. So, the space gets kind of used in some of these battles, but really maybe not to the extent that it could be. What's more on display, and what's probably given the precedent that it should, is the actual powers, right? These actual kind of exchanges between the characters. In a lot of ways, the space around them becomes secondary or even tertiary to the battle. And I think that's significant because, it shows that there isn't really deference to the place that they're at, right? That there's this recklessness that happens whenever these people indulge in these conflicts. And it just destroys and tears up the place around them with little regard towards it, right? I mean, that's the sort of thing that you always hear, that the classic Dragon Ball Z, oh, he's going to destroy the whole city, and let's go fight over there on a bunch of islands where nothing can get damaged. That's that whole thing, right? It doesn't come up a ton. And I mean, like, not something that you would expect a lot of mangaka to really make use of anyway, but it is really neat whenever the actual, like, scene is significant beyond just the characters involved, right? Nevertheless, we do get reminded of Nemu, the vice captain. I had mentioned in the previous chapter that she seemed to kind of background out and to keep an eye out for her. And here, certainly, that does come up, right? Uryu recognizes, like, okay, well, I guess that's his assistant. Maybe she's not a threat. He starts to write her off, and then again, she gets backgrounded, but she comes back in a kind of lethal way in this chapter, which I do appreciate. That, like, that same sort of thing that's happening with us, where our attention is obviously being drawn to this madman Mayuri. It's easy to forget that Nemu is there until the significance of her being there is made real obvious, right? Um, yeah, I like that he, fires the shot. Aryu's now gone, and behind him fires another shot. Fires from above, moving real quickly. I do love, like, just the nonchalance, the cadence of, like, oh yeah, like Mayuri just looking down there, like, oh yeah, that's not bad, you move well. And of course the shock of Uryu over here with the exclamation points. Very effective kind of panel here, I think. Probably one of my favorite moments just in this exchange is this moment, in fact. Um, he brings up this idea, right? Mayuri speaks towards the Hirin Kyaku, right? The Quincy movement technique. The idea that you create a current of reishi or spiritual energy beneath your feet. And you use that current to kind of move around at high speeds. Um, and of course, Mayuri recognizes, like, okay, well, this is an opponent maybe I have to take a little bit more seriously. I like that he also brings up Shinpo, which, we've seen the whole flash step, right? The Shinpo in action with Byakuya and Yoriichi. I like that Mayuri expresses, like, yeah, but it's tiring, and I don't really want to have to deal with that, so I'm just going to kill you in the way that uses the least effort. And I love that, like, that immediately is, we have these other battles evoked so that we can see how Mayuri handles things kind of in juxtaposition. And I do appreciate that. I like his expression in the top left, right? I also like that he says he's a busy man, unlike you. Uh, yeah, it's good stuff. You really get the sense of his character here. Um, of course, he uses his release command here, tear him up. Ashi Sogi Jizo, and again, I wonder if that translation differs, because I don't remember if that ends up being the release command that that it always has in the translation. Yeah, Ashi Sogi Jizo, right? I mean, that's certainly what it's called in general. I just am trying to remember if it ends up having a different release command than tear him up, because I don't particularly remember that one. But I also don't remember, like, if it's the case that that's just like a translation that I don't stick with, or if my own brain isn't doing the thing where it recalls information very well. So we will see. So yeah, I've actually managed to pull it up on my phone, and I was right. I was right, because the Japanese is kakimushire, which this translates later as claw out, but also could be translated as rip. So this idea of this thing being kind of tearing itself out, or tearing into you even. Ashirogi Jizo. And so, yeah, we get a pretty good look. I've kept it on screen for that reason, of his Shikai here. We get this little praying Jizo statue, right? A Jizo, it's this protector of people and the souls of deceased children. It's this little bundled kind of child statue, this baby statue. You might have seen these in pop culture, if not in actual real life. But the idea is that they're meant to kind of help out, be there to protect children and travelers, and you can offer them little offerings and things like that. There's certainly a lot more to it, but feel free to look that up on your own. Um, Needless to say, it is a pretty explicitly Japanese kind of folkloric thing. It's interesting that it's worked here in, of course, Mayuri, because babies are creepy, right? But furthermore, we see that it's kind of breathing out this fume, even, and that's also seems to be coming from these different spikes, these different kind of like things that are poking out from the wrapping that's still about, at its guard. So yeah, and then of course it branches off into three blades. And so you have to wonder, of course, what this does, and that's certainly what Uryu immediately thinks. He's like, okay, what's going on with this blade? Can it absorb? I can't really tell from its shape what it does. Creepy baby sword. There's not time to think. And immediately as he draws zero, that's whenever we have Nemu jump in the way, and she immediately just grabs the arrow itself, grabs Uryu. And I love this moment as Mary bears down upon him and slices the two of them, right? So, of course, his strategy all along was to have her grab and hold on tight, which the chapter title, of course, is referring to. You would be misled to be thinking perhaps this refers to holding on to Orihime to make sure she escapes. But no, clutching onto somebody can be used also to do harm here, right? So it's a neat little thing Kubo's doing there with like somebody holding somebody else. Also, a guy carrying a woman versus a woman that's like kind of like holding into a guy, of course, used in different ways. I don't think it's supposed to be a gendered thing so much as it's supposed to be just different ways in which clutching somebody can play out. Is being played with in kind of a little way here. Obviously, the striking thing is supposed to be that Mayuri doesn't seem to care about Nemu and will cut straight through her to deliver a blow on Uryu. Given the fact that we know that, like, binding magic exists, right? That's like one of the first spells that were shown in, like, the very first chapter of Bleach. Man, it's extra mixed up that Mayuri just has a whole strategy where his lieutenant level captain grabs them with her own body, right? Like, couldn't she just cast Aikido? Like, why does she have to like be injured as a part of it? Of course, right? Nevertheless, we do get this kind of this smile from her, like she's almost glad that she was able to do this duty before she is, of course, beaten for it. And Mayuri berates her, telling her that he had taught her never to let go, even if her arms were torn off. So yeah, we get to see this kind of brutality, and especially this brutality to somebody who seems, you know, not to be a terrible person. She just seems like she's doing what she's told, right? And yeah, I mean, he expresses he wasn't expecting much from her, which, I mean, if we take Renji into account, perhaps you can't expect much out of your lieutenants. Lieutenants seem to be more trouble than they're worth so far, don't they? They're just getting up to all kinds of trouble. I don't know if any of the lieutenants have really done anything beneficiary or fruitful for their captains yet. Maybe that'll change at some point, but certainly doesn't seem to be the case so far. Nevertheless, he expresses that at this point it'll be as easy as strangling a baby, which, of course, with Jizo there is immediately evocative of this kind of perversion of the use of a Jizo, right? That it's this condemnation or this idea that it'd be as easy as murdering a child, which certainly if the Jizo is meant to protect children, that's no it's not the fact that phrase is coming up very specifically to kind of evoke this kind of manipulation of the thing, right? But that's all that we get for the chapter, other than this little Omake moment where, of course, we have the sighting of Don Kanoji and Karen and Jinza, and assumably Ururu, but she doesn't get drawn here. and they're all playing Karakura superheroes. I do love that she's like, wait, this is like super weird guy, and he's screaming about it, but it's Don Kanonji? What? You gotta love that stuff. I mean, it is super weird that he's hanging out with a bunch of kids, but like, hey, they're fighting hollows. They're saving people's lives. Can't buck it. Um, all in all, talking about this chapter, I think this chapter is very solid for establishing, like, really cementing a lot of these character relationships that we already had hints towards, right? Nemu and Mayuri specifically, but also this sort of relationship that Mayuri and Uri are going to have moving forward, right? This clear antagonism, the way in which Mayuri thinks of Uryu, the way in which Uryu thinks of Mayuri, that will only continue to be, frustrated and exasperated as this conflict continues. Of course, important to keep in mind is that there is that whoever this mysterious fellow that's closing in on Orihime and old Maki Maki is something to kind of file away. I feel like these sorts of things happen a good bit in Bleach, and I remember whenever I was reading weekly, I never remember, like, there were like little cliffhangery moments, but I never remembered them whenever I got the payoff, if the payoff even happened later. So like I don't know how effective they really were for the weekly manga, and so I'm curious for the kind of collected volume if it works a little bit better. Uh, but we'll have to kind of see, I suppose. Um, yeah. I mean, like, solid chapter. Of course, we get to see Hashirogi Jizo, or Ashisogi, who Ashisogi Jizo, another Shikai. Although we don't know very much of what it does, getting to see another Captain Shikai is pretty nice and striking. We haven't really seen that many of them. We've seen what, four of them now, I believe, if you count Kisuke, right? We have Kisuke's Benihime. But then we also have Senbon Sakura, which we're not very familiar with what Senbon Sakura can do other than rip a person to shreds in the case of Ganju. Um, but then, and maybe this is like intentional, is that we get to see a lot of these Shikai and we don't get their full suite of abilities because we're not really sure of everything Benihime can do either, right? Um, but then also, yes, we've gotten, of course, kind of famously, the first one we get in Soul Society is Ichimaru Gen's Shinso, which we know that can stab you from very far away, very quickly grow several sizes. And that's it, right? I don't think we've seen any of the other ones. So, yeah, it's kind of exciting to get to see a Captain's Shikai in this chapter, and of course, we'll get to learn a little bit more about what Ashisogi Jizo actually does as we move forward. But I do like that it's evocative of that sort of mythology, that it's immediately kind of got something to pull from. Um, I love that, of course, the translation's like, it's Ashisogi Jizo. Ashisogi means this, Jizo means Jizo. It's like, thanks, guys. Um, Sinbad Sakura, I mean, we don't really, like, the blade disappears and then it's able to cut you. Maybe speaks towards Byakuya's like sudden speed and lethality, but doesn't, we don't really have much that's evocative there yet. There will of course be more to figure out there. Benihime we haven't seen a ton of, and like, yeah, Shinzo is really we get the idea of, like, Shinzo being able to strike rapidly, and that's evocative perhaps of a snake. Um, Shinzo being like, this murder spear, right? That you would shoot someone to death with, or you would stab them to death. So, like, makes sense. It's all kind of straightforward there. But yeah, I feel like out of all of them so far, Ashiroga Jizo is certainly one that is perhaps most evocative and interesting, for maybe any reader that's willing to kind of look into it a little bit more. So yeah, I dig it. Solid chapter. I do certainly want to get into the next couple of them, but let's get to spoilers. Let's talk about spoilers. Let's talk about what's going on in the larger picture here. I don't remember the Maki Maki stuff, as I said, so I'm not an authority to talk on this. I don't remember who the character is here that will detain them. I know that they end up kind of all grouping up with Zaraki, I believe. So, yeah, don't remember who this is. If you can remember who Foot is, let me know in the comments. I don't remember who this is. Definitely the same person who killed Aizen, right? Which to that end, like, who is Foot in Aizen's like thing, right? Assumably Ichimaru again, but I don't know. Anyway, I could have sworn that he retracted this arm, but whenever he grew it back, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, he grew it back. Yeah, which, first kind of hints at the fact that Mayuri is entirely kind of artificial, and that also blowing Mayuri up maybe doesn't really work, as he just has, like a packet of arm juice in there. Yeah, here, and I got some alarms, everybody's going by. I'm not going to edit that one out of the episode. Anyway, of course, this idea of studying until there's only mincemeat left, that will come up later whenever he's talking about. Well, I mean, it already sort of has come up, right? He studied the Quincy, right? But it'll obviously come up more later whenever we actually get into talking about Soken. I believe it's Soken, Uryu's grandfather, right? So yeah. Interestingly enough, I like that he mentions, like, if there's even a strand of hair, that's all he'll need to find her, which, like, you're a captain, man. You could probably just single out Horietsu. It's fine. Though we do also get that, like, he doesn't really want to expend the effort to do Shunpo here, that he'd rather take care of things the most efficient, sort of least effort way, especially whenever it's somebody that, like, dealing with someone like Uryu, who he doesn't feel like there's anything to be gained there, where he just kind of wants to swat this fly. Interestingly enough, with everything with Nemu, and Mayuri kind of being super abusive there, I certainly am reminded of Uryu and his own mother, Katagiri, and I think it's maybe, I mean, like, not really comes as a surprise to me that Katagiri and Nemu sort of are similar in their looks. They have a kind of similar look to them, and that they are both kind of subservient women to somebody else, and there is kind of this, like, undertone of perhaps abuse there. Though I don't really think Ryukin abused Katagiri. I think the idea was that she was going to be betrothed to somebody else that would, or something. It's been a while, but certainly the idea that Ryukin was messing around in Katakiri's guts after her death has left Uryu with this, extreme kind of revulsion of his father, right? That he was operating on her after her death, like doing the autopsy for several hours, right? And you can probably draw that a large part of his reaction here to Mayuri and his kind of, his shock and the trauma of that is being surfaced here. So I do kind of like that as a moment of connection. Of course, this idea of creating the current of spiritual energy beneath your feet, this being a Quincy move, I'm pretty sure that's how Ichigo stays afloat. I mean, he doesn't make a high speed current, but that's certainly, he makes reishi platforms underneath himself in the first little bit of the series to stay in the air, as far as I remember. I think that's kind of a nod towards Ichigo Quincy stuff. Because, and I do like, Mayuri brings up Shunpo, and it's quite tiring. I do like that later Mayuri does just have, like, jet feet, like in Thousand Year Blood War. So, yeah, it's neat that this does come up, that Mayuri doesn't really want to do Shunpo. It tires him out. He feels like it's a waste of energy, and certainly Mayuri is the kind of fellow that would just invent a more energy efficient method to fly around or move at high speed. So yeah, that is kind of neat. Of course, Ashi Sogi Jizo, The idea of it being, that it's gonna poison you and then he will kill you. Um, yeah, messed up. I mean, certainly reflective of Mayuri, right? That he's going to kind of have this way to disable you and then experiment on you if he wants. Again, I'd mentioned this during the chapter read, but the idea that Nemu has to hold on so that he can get that slice in to paralyze Uryu is kind of like, okay, bud. Like, I understand, like, if you don't want to expend the effort to use like some keto, but like, she certainly could, right? 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 I don't know. Maybe it does make more sense, like, and certainly for the shock factor, obviously. Like, I get narratively why it's done. It's to show how callous Mayuri is, and then also to show, extol a couple of aspects of Nemu's character as well. Um, but yeah, and then, you get the striking visual, striking, perhaps slashing visual of them both being attacked by Mayuri. And so, yeah, there's certainly that aspect. Um, but could just use some binding spells. That's all. Which that's like, again, I feel like that makes for perhaps a less interesting narrative moment and one that's perhaps a little bit more cohesive. But I don't know. Certainly, it makes sense from Mayuri's perspective, where he's like, "Well, we don't have to worry about spells. I'll just cut through this stupid woman." And again, perhaps shows his callousness that he would consider that before even considering just using what is it, Bakudo or whatever it is. Um, yeah, yeah. That's all I really had to say here. Um, that's about the full of it. If there's any other bigger connections you want to draw that you see here, especially with Mayuri, especially in this fight with Uryu, do let me know. I do think that, like, interestingly enough, we're already getting a little bit. Later on we would get Uryu's shrift, right, being ooh antithesis, and the idea of turning about a situation certainly happens here, where he kind of renders these wounds on Mayuri far greater than whatever he was kind of hurt. Um, I wish there was maybe a little bit more even that kind of reflected their fortunes. Whenever I talk about reflecting fortunes, I'm starting to think of a balance a little bit more. Certainly, both Nemu and Uryu being slashed at the same time feels almost evocative of that. But yeah, there's like a little bit here that I feel like maybe nods towards that. Which, I mean, it's Bleach. Characters are going to have big comeback victories, whatever. Antithesis is essentially you have the power of comeback victory. Um, so eh. But by the same mark, I think it is kind of neat to kind of see that is something that is present there for Uryu, even this early. But yeah, if there's any other connections that you want to make, especially, go ahead and make them. Let me know. I'm interested to see what you had to say in the comments. As always, with something with a spoiler, just make sure to tag it as such. Um, yeah, that's it for this one, folks. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you've gotten all the way to the end of this video, go ahead and give it a like. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. I try to put up one of these videos every day whenever I can't. I will make a community post and tweet about it. But, provided that my entire system's working, both my physical human system, and I'm not, ill, but also my entire computer system and sound recording system, then you will get these episodes 5 times a week, every week, until we're done with the whole thing. Of course, if you do want to support it in a different way, kind of help out in a larger kind of way, you can always go ahead and support on the Patreon. For as little as $1, you can support me every month, and anytime that you do donate, your name will be on this list that shows up at the end of the episode, and you'll get a special thanks from me. Hey, fellas on this list, thank you. You know who you are. I do appreciate it, really, though. It does mean quite a lot to me. Um, and yeah, if you want to join that group of people that do support me via Patreon, feel free to do so. The link will be in the description for the episode. But that's it for this one, folks. So as always, this has been Carker Gold, reminding you the spirits are forever with you. Stay gold.